Welcome, everyone. We're here today for the Society of Thoracic Surgeons Congenital Heart Surgery Database monthly webinar. Today is Thursday, November the 18th. For our webinar today, let's see here on the call with me, let's see, from STS, we have myself, Addie Dolan, we have Emily Conrad, we have Sydney Clinton. From the core group side, we have Chastity Wellness and Leslie, and from our IQVIA team, we have Steve, Sydney, I'm sorry, Sydney's with STS, of course. Sorry, Sydney, about that. Let's see, we have Steve, Melanie, Joe, and Jean from our IQVIA team. So thank you, everyone, for joining today. I greatly appreciate it. In terms of the agenda for today, I'll just provide a few STS updates, and then I'll turn things over to Chastity. So she'll cover some hot topics, and then we'll turn things over to our IQVIA, and then we'll finish up, per usual, with our user feedback. Please use the Q&A to submit your questions. If you have a ticket number out there that you need follow-up on, if you could, please go ahead and put your question and your ticket number into the Q&A so Melanie and her team can begin looking into that. So let's go ahead and get started. For our STS updates, again, just the 2020 harvest analysis. As you all are aware, the risk-adjusted reports were released on Monday, October 11th. So those reports are available out there. Any report-related questions should be directed to IQVIA directly. Please reach out to us or to IQVIA at CHSD tech support at IQVIA.com. Our 2021 harvest update, just wanted to go ahead and announce that the STS and the task force has decided to extend the 2021 harvest, a short extension through Friday, December the 23rd at 11:59 p.m. Eastern, with the opt-out by Tuesday, December the 28th. There will be an official communication from STS coming, and that will be sent out on Monday, the 22nd. So that communication will go out to all of the surgeons, all of the contacts for the congenital database. So again, that official communication will be coming on Monday of next week, and we'll touch more on the reasons behind the extension here a little bit into the presentation. Also, AQO 2021 update, just a friendly reminder that all content is now available in the STS Learning Center. That content will be available until AQO of 2022. CEs and CEU certificates will be processed once a month based on the prior month's completions. And again, just a reminder that this rolling system will continue for 3 months, and it will end on Saturday, January 15th of 2022. So be sure and get those evaluations done in order to be able to get your credit. Again, the deadline for that is January 15th of 2022. STS updates, again, we had announced this on the last call. Again, just wanted to include the 2022 harvest schedule. The spring 2022 harvest schedule is set to close on March the 11th and opt-outs on March 15th. And of course, this would include procedures up through December 31st of 2021. And then the fall 2022 harvest is scheduled to close on September the 16th, opt-out on September the 20th. And again, that would include procedures up through June 30th of 2022. So again, the harvest schedule is posted out on the STS website. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Please feel free to reach out to me directly. And again, happy to answer any questions. All right, next, I'm going to turn things over to Chastity for our hot topics that she wants to cover today. So Chastity, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you much, Leanne, for that. And so on today's webinar, I don't have so much education as just some tips and things that I would like to discuss and revisit some announcements and things that have been made. So some of this is a repeat, but I think repeats are a good idea. If anything could be confusing or said better. So we're going to talk a little bit about the current report, the 2020 analysis report, and specifically related to those 3.41 procedures and associated stat scores, and then the length of stay calculation, as well as what you need to know for the December harvest that's coming up, and then just a really brief look at what's coming in the future. So next slide, Leanne. So let's start with the analysis report and again review the 3.41 procedures and stat scores. So this is a complete revisit. Next slide. So you received an email, I believe last week or week before, my days run together, from STS that again talked about this topic. So not a new topic. We talked about it on the last webinar, as well as it being a part of that email, but we think it's incredibly important and want to make sure that everybody understands. So as you recall, when 3.41 came out, when that version went live, there were 16 new procedures that were included at the time that it went live. However, the stat scores weren't released until later on while we were already using those terms. So unfortunately, analysis didn't go as expected, and they're not included in this current analysis report, the report that we received in October, only when these terms were a part of a multi-component procedure. So it was completely unexpected and unanticipated. However, when we looked at, I didn't personally, but when STS looked into what this impacted within the data, overall, this impacted fewer than 0.2% of the procedures in the database that were analyzed. So it's a really small number. Now, I don't make light of that because I know some centers who do a lot of these procedures or who were using these codes quite a bit, you may have a higher number, but just overall in the data in and of itself, it's a very small number of total procedures. The good news, the silver lining, is that these will be incorporated into the analysis. So the current harvest that will be closing now later in December of next month. So it will be rectified and it will be changed immediately. Next slide. So this is the list of those 16 codes. And so they were an attachment that, or a link that you could get to these in the email that went out from STS. And so you don't necessarily have to refer back to these slides, but they're here should you want them. Next slide. And there was an example that was presented as well. And so I just wanted to review the example in case you have to explain this to anyone in your centers or just need further explanation. So this is real data from a real site where they entered into their software a DORV ventriculotomy repair, followed by a pulmonary valvuloplasty, and then lastly, a PA reconstruction main. So correctly, they entered the DORV, no ventriculotomy, as the primary procedure. And as you know, this is one of those 16 codes. So what was expected to happen was that this DORV repair would map to DORV intraventricular tunnel repair and be assigned that stat score. But because it's a multi-component procedure, meaning that there was a pulmonary valvuloplasty and this PA reconstruction, unexpectedly in the analysis, it was looked at as though the DORV, no ventriculotomy repair, didn't have a stat score. So it automatically then went and picked up the next procedure that had the highest stat score in the list, which was the pulmonary valvuloplasty. So instead of the expected DORV no ventriculotomy repair, unfortunately, this site has a pulmonary valvuloplasty as their primary procedure and likely their index operation, of the length of stay. So again, there's nothing for you to do in your data. If you use these terms, the terms will be incorporated correctly, appropriately into the analysis in December. All right, so now let's talk about the length of stay calculation. And we'll go to the next slide. So as you know, in my previous webinar, we talked about that there was a new length of stay calculation that was applied. After much talking and listening to statisticians and things, it was decided that the old calculation should be reapplied to the median post-op length of stay. This impacts tables 18 and 19 in the analysis report. And those were, if you remember, it's your post-op length of stay by your benchmark operations, as well as the post-op length of stay by stat mortality category. So this will be applied to the STS aggregate and the STS with sites doing greater than 10 of that specific procedure or stat category. And so it's going to return to a calculation of the median of the participant level means. So you're going to see that the STS aggregate and sites greater than 10 median length of stay is going to change. And so it should happen by next week. And also the calculation spreadsheet will be updated as well to reflect the new calculation. So lastly, an FAQ came in, and I know there was discussion amongst the data managers as well, asking about the endpoint used in the length of stay calculation. So just as a refresher, the length of stay calculations that are reported in our analysis reports are really looking at the difference in time between your OR exit date and time and the database discharge date. So it's not hospital discharge date, but it's database discharge date. Now, this was a correct calculation in the reports, but we understood that the calculation spreadsheet listed hospital discharge date. So that will be updated in the calculation spreadsheet. So what's in your tables won't change, but just so you know that the calculation spreadsheet will change. So let's move into our December harvest information. So as you know, we've been given a small window of opportunity to have a little bit more time to complete our harvest. So the new harvest close date is December 3rd, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. So put that on your calendars, mark it. And just remember that this covers the surgical dates from 7/1 of 2017 through 6/30 of 2021. And you have until 12/28/21 to opt out should your program not want to participate in this harvest. And so this is just a repeat of earlier slides that Leanne has already mentioned, but I just thought important enough to include it here. Yep, next slide, you're fine. So a couple of implications. I know that there was a fantastic presentation. The slides were not, I guess they are posted for AQO. And so this was Janet's talk about the new stat scores coming, as well as what's coming with new data versions and things like that. What I want to do in the webinar is to break it down a little bit, kind of thinking of this as one harvest at a time. So we have a harvest coming up in December. What do you need to know to be successful for your harvest in December? So I'm just taking points from her slides to kind of break those down. So looking at some of the procedures that she called out. So let's recall that our harvest dates are from July of 2017 through June of 2021. And remembering our data versions. So this harvest will cover 2 data versions. So data version 3.41 was implemented in January of 2019, and data version 3.3 was implemented in January of 16. So we have surgical dates that fall under data version 3.3, and then also data version 3.41 that will be included in this harvest. Anytime we move from data version, so 3 to 3.22 to 3.3 to 3.41, you notice that procedures may change. Many fields may change, but especially the procedures, and they may be deleted, they may be added, or they may be modified in some way between the versions. The important part to know here is that your procedures must align with the correct data version. So if something in 3.3 changes in 3.41, you don't go back to those 3.3 surgeries and make them 3.41 terms. You shouldn't do that. You need to leave what was available in 3.3 as is in your database, and same with 3.41. All right, so let's take an example that was given in Janet's presentation. So there was a code, procedure code 430, pulmonary atresia, VSD, MAP cover repair. And so this was a procedure code that was available to us if you were back in doing 3.0 coding. And so we could select that as a valid repair. However, in the upgrade for version 3.22, this term was deleted. And so by January of 2016, we could no longer use code 430. And this code was replaced because obviously we still want to be able to code these types of repairs in our database, but it was really replaced with more detailed procedures, and they fall under codes 2700, 2710, and 2720, which really look at the differences of how the MAPCAs are handled. So if they were a complete repair or a prior complete repair or incomplete repair, or if it was a single procedure all done at one time. So that's what those codes are. So it replaced 430, and now we have to select either 2700, 2710, or 2720. This happened in January of 2016. These are still the valid codes for the procedures for versions 3.22, 3.33, and currently 3.41. So you don't have anything to do in your data, given that the procedures that, or the harvest dates that are being covered have versions 3.3 and 3.41. That's all it's straddling. So you should not have been able to select this term. I went back in my software to look. I cannot select this term 430 to be able to do it, but you shouldn't be using a term that's not available in your current version date. Code 1800, same thing, pulmonary embolectomy. This one tripped me up this year, so I'm glad that we have the opportunity to discuss this, but this is an old code even prior to version 3.0, and admittedly, I didn't keep any data collection forms prior to version 3.0, so I can't tell you when it came live, but it was deleted by the time version 3.0 came out. And it was replaced with more detailed procedures, 1802 versus 1804, which really say that the pulmonary embolus was acute or chronic, and that we wanted to know that level of detail in the repairs. And these are still the valid codes that we should be using throughout versions 3.0, 3.22, 3.3, and 3.41. So again, in 3.3 and 3.41, when you were coding your pulmonary embolectomies, the only options you should have been able to choose were 1802 and 1804, pointing to an acute or chronic embolectomy. And so there shouldn't be anything for you to do with your data related to these. Next slide. Okay, so some tips for harvest success for December. I know we've been given this wonderful window. Some of us might think it's wonderful, some of us might not. My plan of attack here personally, and what I would recommend is, don't pretend, I would say ignore that you have the extension and really work like this is going to end on December 10th. And that way you stay ahead of the game, and that you don't wait until the last minute to try to suddenly, meet your deadline. So however you planned to do your harvest until you found out today that it was going to change, I would do that. There are going to be some IQVIA tool updates that they're going to discuss later on this call, and give you a little bit more background as to why the harvest was extended. But let that tool be something that provides minor tweaks later to your data, and don't wait for that to come out and then start harvesting your data. We know it's busy right before potential holiday celebrations and travel and things like that. So work like it's still going to be December 10th, as you probably have already planned on for a while now. My biggest suggestion is to develop a very organized approach. People do this differently, and if you need some more detailed suggestions, I'm happy to give them. But I know people that put a sign on their office doors, or perhaps on their dining room doors now, that say, "Don't talk to me for the next 3 weeks because I'm doing nothing but STS data harvest. I don't respond to emails, and I don't take phone calls, and I don't join in meetings." That's fine. You do you. You could also do it like every day. I'm going to carve out a couple hours where I work on nothing but STS stuff. And so I usually come up with some kind of checklist, like today I will upload my data. Tomorrow I will, validate my mortalities, however you want to organize it is fine. You have to come up with an approach that works for you, but being very organized will really help you. What are the priorities that you have? I personally, put some internal and external kind of tools down below that I use. And so I really start with what my vendor offers to me, and go through, like, we have missing data reports and things like that. So I can go through and look for any data that needs to be updated or is missing and things. I also review all of my mortalities, making sure that I have all the appropriate, who I've marked as a mortality better be a real mortality, and that I didn't accidentally on database discharge say that somebody was dead when they're in fact alive. And so I make sure that within my software, I know who I'm submitting to IQVIA as dead or alive. And I definitely review my missing data, as I said. Then when I upload my data into IQVIA, I start going through the available reports that they have. So the mortality eligibility summary is the first place I start, because if you're not going to make it into mortality analysis, then I've got to do something. So whether it's that your 30-day is missing and I need to start stalking people and chasing down parents or cardiologists, I want to start early and I want to start now. I then look at the primary procedure mismatch report and make sure that I don't have any mismatches. So the correct procedure is being identified as the primary procedure, and that's where all the analysis will be completed. I again validate my mortalities. Did IQVIA get something that I didn't catch in my software? Remembering that there are multiple fields that tell both IQVIA and DCRI upon analysis of who's dead. So make sure you're looking at your 30-day mortality, your hospital discharge mortality, and your database mortality. And then, of course, the missing variable report is huge. And I know that there are a lot of huge, as in it's powerful, and then also huge that you could have a lot of missing data. I really start filtering that by what do I absolutely have to have. I can't have missing dates of birth. I can't have missing genders. I can't have missing weights. All of those hit risk models and would could preclude me from being analyzed in the table. So I worry about all of those up front that hit all those tables before I worry about, perhaps something that is, I don't want to say less important, but really less important when it comes to being included in the analysis report. And so then I triage it from there. And so something that's really important is my mortality follow-ups. Something that might be less important, I don't have to chase down today, worried that I'm not going to be in the report. So if that gives you, a little bit of help, you're welcome to contact me, and I'm, happy to help you organize and get into a little bit more specifics as it relates to this. It's a big job, and I completely understand it. And I don't make light of, if you're new to this, that you might need a little extra support. So please reach out to me. Next. So the 2020 stat score implementation. So next slide here. So just so you know, the 2020 stat scores will be applied in the spring 2022 harvest. So keeping this as a one harvest at a time, I included this in one slide. But just so you know, Appendix C will have to update, being reflective of the new stat scores. And then also there are going to be changes to the IQVIA primary procedure mismatch report, and their logic will update as well. So there will perhaps be some opportunities to have to recode a few procedures and things. And so there will be much more information to come out with this implementation. And of course, anything else that will be important to the spring 2022 harvest. I think for now, the take home message is really pay more attention to the December close and worry about what's coming later. And just so you know, the vendors will not be required to update the stat scores in your software between the data versions. So for many people, you may not see your stat scores, if they're embedded in your software, update until you get out there to the version upgrade in July. And that's okay, because IQVIA's primary procedure mismatch report will be able to help you if anything was reassigned or should no longer be the primary procedure. But we'll talk about all of that in the future. For those of you who have questions regarding harvest, I know we have up to 30 days to answer your FAQs. Sometimes it takes us longer because you ask us such great questions, and it takes many a conversation to hash something out and understand all the implications of our answers. And so we appreciate your patience, but I do know that many of you may have questions that are very important to harvest and will need a timely response. So I do want you to go ahead and submit your questions to the FAQ box. And if you, in the text where you write your question down, if you would put in there, like the first word is, harvest, or this is for harvest, something like that, something to cue it and flag it, I will prioritize those as they come in right now to make sure people aren't hanging out in the wind and not getting answers to things. And if it means that we have to have perhaps an extra call for the core group, we've had 2 calls in October to answer your questions, as well as 2 calls in November. And so we're really trying to keep up and be very timely with these. But if we need an extra call, or we need to send some emails and have some good discussions, we will absolutely do that. But please just put on their harvest so that I know to prioritize it for right now and get you those answers quickly. So that's all I have to say.
Excellent. Thank you, Chastity. Appreciate it very much. Next, we are going to turn things over to Joe for our IQVIA updates. Joe?
Thanks, Leanne, and thank you, Chastity. Good afternoon, everybody. Just some updates from our end regarding things that will be fixed in an upcoming release, starting with the November 2021 update, which should occur this weekend on the 20th. For the risk-adjusted dashboard report, STS 7473, in regard to tables 18 and 19, the report is currently showing the same results for length of stay for both the STS overall and the N greater than or equal to 10 categories. And so we will be making a correction to the calculation so that those results are brought in line with what is expected. Next is STS 7506 and 7509. Similar to the one I just mentioned, we'll be making similar updates to the calculations for operative mortality, as the STS aggregate rate percentage and the N greater than or equal to 10 aggregate rate percentage are currently showing as the same, and that should not be. STS 7475 on the anesthesia report, calculation updates will be made for the anesthesia all operations total number of CPB and no CPB cases, and the anesthesia CPB, no CPB reports, as they are currently displaying different results when they should not be. STS 7486, again on the anesthesia CPB, no CPB report, records are being counted twice on the cross clamp and DHCA categories. So we'll be making a fix for that. Next slide.
Sorry, Joe, my mouse is
You're fine.
acting up.
All right. Continuing on with adjustments to the risk adjusted dashboard report, SCS 7498. The calculation for post-operative length of stay for the SCS overall and among sites with greater than or equal to 10 will be updated to calculate the median of the means to align with the results that were previously provided in the historic PDF report. And then along those same lines, SCS 7546, the calculation for post-operative length of stay for the SCS overall and among sites with greater than or equal to 10 for the range and interquartile range will be updated to calculate each participant PLOS and then find the min and max values for those results. All right, and then on this one for the case eligibility and mortality analysis report, SCS 7380, the CHSD case eligibility report should display the MT30 stat variable as missing when unknown is selected on the case form. And so that update will be included with this weekend's release as well. And for this last slide, I'm going to turn things over to Melanie, if she's there.
I think Melanie she's
I'm
there.
here. I'm
She
here.
is. There she is.
Yep. Can you hear
Double
me now?
muted.
I was
Yes,
double
ma'am.
muted. I double muted myself. Good afternoon, everyone. For this last one, I'll take this last update. So we will have an update that's going out in December, and that is targeted for December the 4th, and that is for the missing variable report. We recently got a submission related to the denominator counts on the MVR that are not showing accurate counts of the record. So the missing calculation is not giving the true number. So that will be updated, and we are targeting again for that release on December the 4th. So that will be available for you all to be able to review. Okay, I think that's the last item that we have.
Yep.
And
Sounds
of
great.
course, just the last, I'll just wrap it up. Usually Joe takes this, but if you do have submitted tickets that are currently under review, please know that we are reviewing those submissions and we'll get back with you regarding our findings. And we are continuing to review outstanding items that will be included in future releases. Okay, thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mel. Thanks, Joe. Of course, I'm just going to scoot through these final slides. You all are very familiar with these. The IQVIA support plan. Again, just a reminder to please include your participant ID number in communications with STS and IQVIA. A list of resources that are available to you out on the STS website. My contact information, if you need to reach me, please feel free to email me directly. If you have database operational questions regarding contacts, payments, invoices, direct data entry, anything related to database operations, please reach out to us at stsdb@sts.org. If you do not know who to reach out to, please feel free to email me and I can get you in touch with the appropriate staff. Upcoming webinars, just want to remind you all, our next user group call is December the 7th at 12 p.m. Central Time. And our December monthly webinar, of course, will be canceled due to the holidays. I am reviewing the 2022 webinar schedule with Carol, so I'll update more on our December webinar. Our next call is coming up in January. So again, just a reminder, the December monthly webinar is canceled, but we will have our user group call on December the 7th at 12 p.m. Central Time. That's all that I had. We'll turn things over to you all for Q&A. I do see several questions starting to come in, so let's go ahead and tackle our questions. I did want to reiterate that the harvest close date, here, let me go this way. Sorry for the angry scrolling. The harvest close, actually, this is a typo on my part. The harvest closes on Thursday, December the 23rd at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. So I will correct that on this slide prior to posting. But again, the harvest close date is Thursday, December the 23rd. It's not going to be Friday. Obviously, we know Friday is Christmas Eve. So again, harvest close date, Thursday, December the 23rd. So apologies for my typo there on that slide. I will get that corrected. All right, let's go ahead and tackle our questions. Let's see, will there be a hold on PUF requests until analysis is completed for the next harvest report? Kelly, I do not know the answer to that question. If you could reach out to the STS Research Center directly, Robert and his team would be able to, Banu, Kristen, they would be able to answer that question. If you don't have an email directly for them, just feel free to email me, Kelly, and I'll get you over to the STS Research Center for a response for that question. And of course, Cindy, yes, thank you for pointing that out, Cindy. Again, the harvest close date is Thursday, December the 23rd, not Friday, Christmas Eve, so I apologize. And Jen, I think your question, your comment was in response to the primary procedure mismatch. The IQVIA should catch these, right? And yes, as Chastity had mentioned, IQVIA will catch, the primary procedure mismatch report will be updated to reflect, as Chastity had discussed in her presentation. If that's not what you were referring to, if you just want to clarify, that'd be great. McCall, when will you update the procedures? The new 2020 stat score were not updated yet. No, as we stated, the 2020 stat scores will be updated with the version 6.22, which will go live in July of 2022. So the new stat scores will be released and updated in July with the release of the new data version in July of 2022. Could you please provide a priority listing of missing data to resolve? So I know Chastity had covered in her presentation on focusing on harvest cleanup. I do know in the missing variable report, one thing that I have always instructed participants when it comes to prioritizing your data cleanup, focus on the risk model variables. I know in the missing variable report, there is a filter that you can use to focus on risk model variables. Also focus on the mortality variables, mortality discharge date, database discharge date, 30-day status. So I would encourage you to start with the mortality variables, primary procedure mismatches, and again, in the missing variable report, focus on your risk model variables, mortality variables. And again, if you have any issues, how to access those, IQVIA support would be able to help you, show you how to filter and prioritize your cleanup and locate those data in your missing variable report. Chastity, did you have anything to add on
No, I think you
prioritizing
said,
your cleanup?
I think you said everything that I would have said. I always start with what would preclude you from being in table 16 is where I start, and then go out from there. So yes, table 16 would be anything that's in the model 1, those variables, which is in the analysis overview. You can see what gets included there. So that's your pre-op factors and chromosomal abnormalities, birth weight, things like that. And so I make sure of that first, and then I move out from there. So anything that would hit any of the tables. So there's intubation and extubation in the tables. There's length of stay in the table. So making sure everybody has a valid, discharge date that's supposed to have a discharge date. And so I really just, intubation or extubated in the OR, like those are all hitting analysis tables. And so I make sure that I have completeness of anything after the risk model variables and mortalities, then what would cause me to not be in the other reports and have missing in those reports. So I then go after all of that. And so then that leaves kind of those scraggly fields that we collect that perhaps aren't, might be being used for other reasons, but aren't in our direct analysis reports. And then I just go down the list from there and get everything that I can within the time frame.
Great, thank you. Let's see here. I don't know if Sydney is still on. I know she was on, but I don't know if she is anymore. When will the STS public reporting website be updated with the most current data? I do know STS public reporting is on hold for now for congenital. There are ongoing discussions. I don't know if Dr. Meyer is still on, if he wanted to elaborate regarding the public reporting, Dr. Meyer?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
I think there are a couple of things that are part of that discussion. Not only, I think most of it has to do with what to report and in what format we report the benchmark operations, as well as the overall, if you will, table 16 type results. So those discussions are still underway, exactly how the data would be presented. There've been a couple of different suggestions. One is to model what's done in the United Kingdom system, so-called PREAS model. And the way the data is displayed there, they actually studied that pretty carefully and had focus groups for parents and people who would otherwise be using the or accessing the data. So I think there's some enthusiasm, if you will, for that, but I'm not sure that we as a task force group have settled on that. The other part of it, though, has to do with the benchmarks and operations and how we define them. And part of the thought about why we would change how we do that is based on the findings from the study that I was deeply involved in, where we looked at all the risk adjustment methodology and came up with a number of observations. For those of you who are interested, they will be coming out in the Annals of Thoracic Surgery pretty soon, and at least the risk model will be presented at the STS meeting in January. But anyway, what we found out was that in many of the cases, particularly for the so-called palliative procedures like bidirectional Glenn's and Norwoods being two that are in particular in the current benchmark group, diagnosis had a big impact on what the outcome of the procedure was. And so, how we incorporate that information, into something that's a benchmark operations report that would be then presented for so-called public reporting. I think those are the issues that we're still working through. And I'm not sure that we've reached any necessarily consensus on how to report, how to display the data, as well as exactly what we will report as far as the benchmark operations are concerned, because that's where case mix really gets into into affecting the results. And by case mix, I'm talking specifically about the diagnosis that happens to be associated with for a stage 1. I mean, data is quite clear that there's as much as a 5-fold variation in the outcomes for a stage 1 operation, depending on what the underlying anatomic diagnosis is. So double inlet left ventricle with LTG. Well, anyway, I don't want to get into too many details, but there are some variants that have a mortality rate as low as 5%, and there are others that have a mortality rate as high as 30%. So you can see the potential for incomplete or inaccurate information if you lumped all of those together. So that's just gives you a flavor about what we're wrestling with.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. And I think you may be able to best answer this next question. Is there a reason Table 16 is broken down the specific way it is by age category? The question was raised at my institution, and I wasn't sure if there was specific reason in the way the categories are broken down on Table 16.
I don't think there's a specific reason. My history doesn't go quite as far back as others, but I think it was just in an attempt to display the data in in multiple ways, so you could sort of get multiple looks at it rather than just a single table. Because clearly a lot of the stat 1 and stat 2 level cases are not going to be done in neonates necessarily. And so if you did an ASD closure in a neonate, well, that probably is going to behave a little bit differently. So it was just an attempt to give a little more granularity in how how to think about the results. That's all.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Meyer. And again, and if you have any questions, getting back to our public reporting question, if you have questions about how to participate, if you want to participate, your current status, anything public reporting related questions, please reach out to Sydney Clinton. And I did put Sydney's email in the chat box. So again, she can be reached at sclinton@sts.org. Our next question from Beth, will DCRI rearrange our primary mismatches to correct order if we miss some? Does that make sense? So Beth, DCRI will assign primary procedure based on the rules. So if your primary procedure doesn't match what DCRI will, I think somebody has their hand raised, and I think it might be, oh, that's Ruthie. Hold on, Ruthie, I'm coming to you next. DCRI won't rearrange, DCRI will assign primary procedure based on the rules, but I'm not sure if I understand what you mean by rearrange.
It won't
Do you know,
rearrange in your
Chastity?
software. Yeah, it won't
Okay.
rearrange in your software or anything, but if you miss one or are in error with one and didn't change it, DCRI will analyze the correct procedure based on the rules. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But it won't match your local data. So just understanding that.
All right. So Kelly, so I mentioned an opt-out form that needs to be completed. There is no opt-in form. So you submit your data, as long as you do not send in an opt-out form that's saying that you do not want your data included in the analysis, the data will be used. So there is no opt-in like there used to be. It's just only if you choose to opt out of the harvest. So let's see, Ruthie. I unmuted you, Ruthie. You should be able to talk.
Hi, everybody. And I guess this is just in addition to that primary procedure mismatch report. So that's great. You know, that's going to be enhanced, and that's going to be a little bit more valuable, just, you know, showing us more accurately what the mismatches are.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, and like it was clarified right now, that if there's still something that IQVIA is not able to catch, DCRI will do it on the analytics side. So just making sure that we also get an enhancement report when the analysis comes back, just showing us what DCRI assigned as the primary procedure and the primary diagnosis, so we can match it to our local data.
Yeah, and we've talked about that, and thank you for that, Ruthie. Yes, so that is something that we're in discussions with IQVIA as an enhancement to provide such a type of report as that. So thank you, Ruthie. That was a great idea. All right. Let's see. Any other questions? I know Dr. Myers responding to Kelly. I don't see any additional questions coming in. I don't see any hands raised. Just wanted to, in regards to the opt-out form, I just wanted to show you all where that is. I know not many people, we don't typically get a lot of opt-outs for congenital. But in case you were wanting to know where that form is, so out on the STS website, on the STS National Database homepage, if you scroll down to harvest schedule and information, click on this link. There's a link here to fill out the opt-out form. So just click on this link here if you ever choose to opt out of a certain harvest. But again, if you do not wish to opt out, please, there is no action necessary from you all. Brooks, do we have a list of the institutions who participated in the last harvest? So no, ma'am, I do not have that list. I know all of that information was in the old overview, but moving forward in the current analysis overview, that's something that I would have to manually update every single harvest, but that's something that we will not continue to publish in the current overview. As well as a list of the surgeons. That was a lot of work, and I would have to, yeah. So that information is not going to be continued in the overviews moving forward. So let's see here. All right. I don't know if anyone else had anything else they wanted to add. Let's see. So we have about 10 more minutes, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I'm still not seeing any additional questions come in. All right, with that, thank you everyone for participating today. Thank you STS, IQVIA teams for helping me with today's webinar. If you all have any questions, if you think of something after the webinar, please feel free to email me directly. My email is ljones@sts.org. Sorry for the aggressive scrolling. So ljones@sts.org. Please feel free to reach out to me with any additional questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for assistance today. I appreciate it. I hope you all have a great holiday next week. Eat lots of good food. So with that, we'll see you all at our next call on December the 7th at 12 p.m. Central. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you guys all have a great holiday. Thank you.